Just one or two things I could advise: keep it small and keep very focused and engaged with your customers from day one. What happens when a venture capitalist gives you a large chunk of cash like that? He wants you to put it to work. And what that means is you go out and you hire a whole bunch of people, and all of a sudden you've got internal fiefdoms and whatnot, and you become less and less customer focused, product market or profit market fit before scaling.
On this episode of the Liberty Ventures podcast, I get to talk with Alan Fisher, a multi-time successful entrepreneur, a very successful angel investor who's now chairman of Iron Speed Inc. and very active with Sandhill Angels, where Alan shares how his experience as an entrepreneur has allowed him to vet opportunities better, and his experience as an investor has given him insights into how to build stronger companies. He gives us a long list of recommendations for founders on what to do. The only one I'm going to share right now that I think is really important is to make sure that you're finding early traction with customers. That's the most important thing in order to figure out what customers will actually pay for and how you're going to scale. And then as an investor, he gave us another litany of things that he looks for in companies. But the one that I'll share right now is that he looks at the real opportunity for the company to hit $100 million in revenue in the next 6 years with its current management team. That's the key question for him. There are others as well, but those two I think are just so insightful and powerful for both founders and investors to consider. And he teases us at the end with how he's seen the investing landscape change from the dot-com bubble back in 2000 to where we are right now, and comparing that with where AI is or blockchain was 5 years ago, how to interpret those signals and make the most out of them. It's an incredible conversation. Hope you enjoyed as much as I did. All right, Alan, thanks so much for joining us today. For anyone who's not familiar with your background, I want to give you a chance to first share your experience, your story, so that everyone has perspective for the conversation we're about to have.
Great. Thanks for having me. My pleasure. My background is like many entrepreneurs. I have a software engineering background. My degrees are in electrical engineering. Got into the startup world fairly early in my career. Had the opportunity to co-found and take two companies public back in the 90s. One was an early e-commerce company, and the other was a document management software company. More recently, have been in and out of venture capital, doing a lot of angel investing, and I'm working on a fintech startup at the moment.
Amazing. Now, what's really driven you throughout your career? Was it your love of engineering? Was it a certain problem that you wanted to solve? What's been your motivator?
That's a good question. I think, like most engineers, I just like to create things, invent new things, right? 100 years ago, we were called inventors, and that's what I like to do: develop new, in my case, software and internet products.
Amazing. Having been an engineer for a long time, with starting several companies, I'm curious for any of the other founders out there listening right now. What have been some of the biggest lessons you've taken from the companies that you've started? And then I'll dive into a few other things with that. But let's just start with the lessons.
Sure, where to start? I think the most important one when you start out with any idea, any venture, is to work small. Keep your team very small. Keep the product very focused. Engage with your potential customers before you start doing anything. That's really a lesson in product market fit, or as I like to refer to it, profit market fit. And I think it's very important for anyone doing a startup to make sure you've got some customer traction very early on with whatever product or service you're developing, so that you know that you're on the right track. Almost all startups, in my experience, pivot a couple of times along the way. And so that's why I always advise folks, and try to hew pretty close to that myself, of keeping things very small from the get go. My current startup is just me and my co-founding partner. So it's just two of us. We don't have any outside investors. We can change course whenever we want or learn something new. And it keeps us very focused on customers. I've found a lot of companies along the way uh, get excited, they raise a lot of money, and then they go out to market and find the market isn't where they thought. They're not really solving a problem necessarily that people want to solve. one of the two companies that I co-founded and took public, we funded all of our product development from customers. We raised no outside capital, and the customers kind of drove our product direction. They came to us asking for features. We charged for that and kept the rights, of course, and grew organically that way. So we were always very close to our customers throughout that process. So if there's just one or two things I could advise, keep it small and keep very focused and engaged with your customers from day one.
Oftentimes, entrepreneurs learn this the hard way by either not being engaged with their customers or going a little too big. I'm curious if you've got any stories from your time that have taught you these lessons.
Yes, there was a company I was on the board of back in the late 90s. And they started out small, had some early customer traction, and then went out and raised their very first round, which was a $20 million round. That was when a time when money was very easy, kind of like it was a few years ago here. And what happens when a venture capitalist gives you a large chunk of cash like that? He wants you to, quote, put it to work. And what that means is you go out and you hire a whole bunch of people, and all of a sudden you've got internal fiefdoms and whatnot, and you become less and less customer focused. One of the VCs on the board, uh, Jos Hankins from Advanced Technology Ventures, took the CEO out to lunch and said, if we were smart, you would just let all your employees go except for the real core team, focus on getting everything right and making sure you can get some customer traction, and then start to spend the money and scale up. Of course, that's not what happened because the other VCs wanted to get big fast. And sure enough, ended up cratering, as many of these things do. We're seeing a lot of that in the market now today, in my experience. You see a lot of companies that were able to raise a lot of money fast in 2020, 2021. It started to come down in 2022, and you have a lot of cram down rounds occurring now because of this. It's like you say, you should husband your cash and work real hard to make sure you've got product market or profit market fit before scaling.
And so much of that really is to help entrepreneurs remember that the customers are the customers, the investors aren't the customers. And they need to focus on achieving that profitability and scaling that to have a thriving business rather than just thinking about the next funding round.
I'm sure you see a lot of that as a venture capitalist who get emails, and under traction, they list the amount of money raised or how close they are to filling their current round. That's not traction. Customers are traction. Revenue is traction. Some metric of customer engagement is traction. Letters of intent, proofs of concept. There's all manner of traction out there you can have, but fundraising is not one of them.
That's right. And customer engagement really is key. And knowing what your customers want in order to serve it is critical. How have you gone about engaging your customers in the most effective way, not just seeing their purchases, but really understanding what they're looking for, how to improve your products, and to be able to serve them most effectively?
It takes a little time, but it's actually pretty easy. You've just got to pick up the phone, or you've got to go out and meet them in person. And it depends on the nature of what you're doing, of course. Sometimes it's a phone call or something simple like that. Other times you need to, perhaps get on a plane and go meet them. One of the companies that I founded, it was an early e-commerce company, and we had some early, very low cost marketing luck. And as we started to get sales, we noticed pockets of sales coming from a couple of places. One was a suburb of St. Louis, and the other was Princeton, New Jersey. We got on the phone and called some of those folks and said, how did you hear about us? This was back in 1995, before the internet was well known. This was very early days. And sure enough, in both cases, there was a company in St. Louis, a suburb of St. Louis, where one person bought a product from us, told the others in our immediate work group that about us. They bought products, and then you could see the expansion roll out from there. Same thing with Princeton, New Jersey. It turns out that a parent at the Princeton County Day School bought a product from us, told other parents at this school, and that's how the cloud of customers emerged from that. And so, just getting out there and talking to folks, I think, is a big big deal. In the case of the other company that I co-founded, it was a very specialized product at the outset, focused on pharmaceutical companies that were doing new drug or new device applications. And so many of those folks are clustered in New Jersey, as it turns out. And so you just go meet with those folks. And if you aren't in the pharmaceutical ecosystem, you wouldn't understand what goes into a new drug or new device application, but it's 50 to 100,000 pages of documentation. And in our case, they needed electronic help for assembling those very large documents. You might need an index, table of contents, things like that. And that's part of what our product did. So we wouldn't have even guessed anything remote about those needs, and what the FDA was requiring in their case, and what the cycle was of preparing these applications. Because, as you may know, there's a limited time on patents of 17 years. And so it takes about 10 years to get one of these applications through the Patent Trademark Office and through the FDA. So if you can shave months off that, that's actually a big deal to your uh, uh, companies, so your clients. So uh, once we understood that, we could work pretty closely with them and get them something that was spot on in terms of their needs. And again, that's such a focused industrial application. You wouldn't know about that unless you really got on the phone and talked to these people and worked through what their exact requirements were.
Brilliant. Now, you're not just an entrepreneur, you're also an angel investor yourself. You're part of the Sandhill Angels. And I'm curious, how much of your experience being an entrepreneur do you bring into your investing? And in what ways are you doing that?
Uh, a lot. I think it helps me be a better investor, that I am an entrepreneur, and I think as an investor, it helps me become a better entrepreneur as well. It really is a synergistic or mutually beneficial relationship. It's nice on one hand to see lots of pitches, how people do those pitches, what you like, what you don't like, what resonates with you, and so I can take that experience as an investor to the other side of the table as an entrepreneur, and understand when the time comes to pitch investors what resonates with them, and not, because I've been on both sides of the table. And again, as an investor, um, you kind of learn what to look for, what works, what doesn't work, and so it's a very synergistic relationship.
Now, as an angel investor, there are three things that everyone said that you should look for, of course. You look at the team, you look at the market, and you look at the product or service. But everyone has their own unique methodology within that. And you just mentioned you've learned a lot about what to look for. So, what are some of the things that you've learned to look for over your career and that you pay attention to nowadays?
That's a great question. I think number one, to your point, is this a big idea? You want to avoid lifestyle businesses. So I always look for business opportunities that I think can generate 100 million in revenue in the first 6 to 8 years. Of course, not every company is going to achieve that. It has to be timing, the great team, and so forth. But I look for big opportunities. And the second is, can the existing founding management grow that business to $100 million? I've learned over the years that you cannot hire an entrepreneur. Once you get to a certain size, you can certainly hire managers, but to get it to that first stage, the first 20, 50, $100 million, it has to really be the founding team. So my litmus test there is, if the circumstances were right, would I work alongside or for the entrepreneur? If that's not the case, it may be a great idea, but it's still going to be a pass for me. Number three, as you've heard me mention, really is customer traction. I need to see some evidence that they're out there engaging with customers, that there is a need for this, that I'm not just spending my money to see if there's any need for this product. I want the company to have done that first. And as I've also mentioned, capital efficiency. Have they been able to stretch a dollar as far as possible? Have they got their customers to pay for product development like we did? I invested in a company through Sandhill Angels back in 2016, 2017. And it was just a two-person company that had a little under a million run rate in sales at the time. They were outsourcing a lot of their operations, and they were able to grow that company break even profitably up to about 60 million before they were acquired. So capital efficiency is important. I've mentioned profit market fit. Can they make and sell this company profitably? It's one thing to go raise 5 or $10 of venture capital to generate $1 of revenue. That's, just buying revenue. What you want to see is the economics the other way around. Can you, raise $1 of money and generate 5 or 10 in revenue? And then I wanna make sure there's a path to profitability, amongst these, opportunities. I kinda want to avoid the Peter Pan syndrome where these companies never wanna grow up and they just raise round after round after round, and profitability is always 2 years, in the future. I wanna see a path ultimately to liquidity there. And I think one key element of that is having a low cost, sales and marketing regimen. Most really successful businesses I found in the early days have some unique way to get out to the market in a real low cost way that doesn't involve spending a lot of money on Google and Facebook ads. I think two-thirds of all venture capital raised ends up in the pocket of Google and Facebook in the form of advertising. So might as well just buy shares in Google and Facebook, I think. And finally, there's a return on my investment. I always look to have, at least at an early stage, pre-seed investment. Do I expect to make 20x return on my investment? As you know, this is a hit record business. One success pays for 8 or 9 donuts. And so you really have to have economics like that. So the price has to be right, I think.
That is a phenomenal list for anyone listening to work with as an investor. And again, I'm curious how you came about these specific numbers. Like $100 million is such a specific number you're looking at. How did you get there? Is this based on some of those donuts that didn't work out for you? Is this just what you've seen with the ones that have succeeded, or how have you gone about creating this?
A lot of it comes from experience. I've had businesses that have gotten up to that size where in 5, 6 years we grew it to 600 million ARR, and I've had businesses that after 10 years I've involved with that are at 3 million ARR, and that's what you want to avoid. These end up being lifestyle companies at the end of the day. These companies that have 2 to 10 million a year in sales. There's nothing wrong with these businesses. They can operate profitably or break even at least. But there's not going to be an exit for a company that size. You get a company that's up, 25, 50 million or north of that, then there's usually an exit to be had. And the larger you become, I think the better the exit you have because you're going to get acquired by a public company at 100 million in sales. If you're 10 or 20 million in sales, likely you're going to get acquired by a private company, some other venture capital backed company. And those exits, in my experience, tend not to be nearly as rewarding as the ones where you exit to a public company. So that's why I always look for a big, uh, revenue payoff. The same thing I think when I say, yeah, I want a 20x return on my investment. If you just look at the economics of angel investing or venture investing, that you really do kind of need those economics to pay off because when you're investing pre-seed, as most angel investors are, there's a high likelihood of failure out there, right? So, you've experienced this where uh, you really, at the end of the day, don't know which of those 10 companies that you invested in is going to be the winner. Um, you of course think everyone you invest in is going to be a big winner, but
Of course,
it
that's why
just
you're
doesn't
investing
work.
in them.
That's why you're investing, right? So it's you definitely don't want to average down. And I'm a big believer in the power law of investing, at least at the pre-seed stage. Um, AngelList did some research on this, and they found that their investors that had larger number of companies in their portfolios had higher rates of return than those with just a handful. You just simply widen the aperture, and you have a bigger chance, I think, of catching those outsized companies. The company, for example, I mentioned earlier that uh, ran break even for nearly all of its life, except for the one angel round that we invested in, exited to a public company, and we made 62 times our money on that deal. And a 62x return pays for a lot of donuts.
Yes, it does. Congratulations on that one. As we get ready to wrap up, I'm curious, how has the investing and entrepreneurial landscape changed over your career? And what do you see coming up that other people might be missing right now?
I started angel investing back in the late 90s, early 2000s, was quiet, kind of quiet in the middle 2000s. I was very busy with a startup of my own, and then got much more engaged, about 2015 or so. And it's been kind of interesting to see the difference between the dot-com era and now, the last 8 or 10 years. Back in the dot-com era, a lot of money was being raised and invested in companies that literally were just a PowerPoint, a business plan, not even a website. That's really changed. Angel and VCs are almost uniformly investing in companies that are real. They have some revenue, some traction. On the other hand, I think there's a lot more money available out there now, even today after the crash in 2022, 2023. And I see a bifurcation out there. If a company's still growing at a good rate, it's still raising money at 10 times projected yearly sales, right? ARR, what's 2024 look like? We're projecting this. And so you can get a 10x valuation. If you're only growing at 20, 30%, then you're going to have a cram down round, and it's difficult to find investors. So it's become very bifurcated. But in my view, there's still a little too much money out there chasing deals. You can see this in today's deal flow, the tsunami of AI related deals. I swear every pitch deck that seems to come our way, and we look at about 200 a month, has AI on it. It's like uh, 5, 6 years ago, everything had blockchain stamped on it. And so you see a lot of folks trying to ride the wave. By the way, I think now is actually a good time to invest in crypto blockchain companies because we've been through that, wave,
It was
that
a normal
hype of
time, like investing in the internet again after 2001.
exactly. So, it'll be a great time to invest in AI in about 4 or 5 years. I think. And so, while and it feels like the AI wave is somehow bigger than the dot-com wave was at time, at least with the, dot-com, you had a real diversity of companies out there. They were just moving onto the internet is what they were doing, right? Now there's so many folks focused on doing AI, in a business to business type, context. You gotta wonder how many of these guys really are going to be successful. Um, I don't know. There's very few of those, for example, that I've seen that I've liked. But like I say, I think while there are a lot of large checks raised back in the dot-com era, it feels like there's even more money floating around now. But the upside is with revenue, there is hope of profit. Unlike dot-com, with no revenue, there is no hope of profit.
Alan, this has been incredibly insightful. Thank you for sharing your experience and wisdom with the Liberty Ventures community today.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.